The era of Riz officially begins for the New Orleans Saints this weekend in what could be the most fun football game we've seen since week 2. We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as the Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net and Saints analyst with WWL TV. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, it is officially the first game of Darren Rizzy's era as the New Orleans Saints interim head coach. He will bring the New Orleans Saints to the Caesars Superdome to defend their house against the NFC South leading Atlanta Falcons. Trying to play spoiler there. We'll take a look at the real expectations that should be set in this game going up against the Falcons. We'll dive into the building blocks of the future for this team that will be on display. We're going to kick everything off with the new look of these New Orleans Saints. It wasn't just the head coach change and a few player changes and things like that. Darren Rizzy has changed, well, about everything. So we're going to dive into all of that on today's episode. We appreciate you for making us your first listen and being an everydayer here on the show, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. They're going to help you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free today at linkedin.com. Just Locked On NFL, terms and conditions apply. The New Orleans Saints are about to begin their era of Riz, the Riz era. They're about to be all rizzed up, going up against the Atlanta Falcons. And this is going to be a new look New Orleans Saints, not just because Darren Rizzy's now the head coach and they've traded Marshon Lattimore away, but there are a few big things that I want to make sure that we're highlighting here beyond that. Yes, when it comes to the interim head coach of Darren Rizzy, you're going to get a very different play style than you got from Dennis Allen. Look, the system's not going to change. The Saints aren't going to all of a sudden have brand new plays that they didn't have in the playbook before. Anything that you see new is basically because of the fact that they've had it and now they're going to use it. It's not something that they just kind of installed in playbooks and stuff like that. That goes for both sides of the football. But you are now entering sort of this Bobby Boucher Bourbon Bowl situation for the New Orleans Saints. Last game of the year, no holding back now, right? Like it's that kind of an idea here when it comes to the New Orleans Saints, who have very little to lose moving forward, but still a lot to gain. And you've got now an interim head coach that, quote, wears his heart on his sleeve, as he mentioned, who loves and cares about these players and wants to see them go out there and have fun and compete and be in position to be their best selves. So you're going to see a lot different when it comes to this. And it's not just who's on the sideline with the headset and everything. Like Darren Rizzy's still going to call things when it comes to the special teams game. But now you've still got Clint Kubiak calling the offense. Over on the defensive side, you've got Joe Woods calling defensive plays, the defensive coordinator. And of course, you fired Dennis Allen. So not only did you lose the head coach, but you lost your defensive coordinator / play caller. So now Joe Woods takes that over. He and defensive backs coach Marcus Robertson work together to prep the passing game plan. And then you have Michael Hodges as well as Todd Grantham, the linebacker coach. And we can call him defensive line coach, but he ain't working with the defensive line no more, Todd Grantham. Those two guys are going to head up kind of working with the run game. And Todd Grantham now moved away from coaching the defensive line, even though there's not an official title change. He's kind of serving as a senior defensive advisor alongside Joe Woods. And so now you've got Brian Young, who's been with the team coaching since 2009 and was with the team before that, 2006 to 2008, as a player. Now he's coaching the defensive line. So we'll see if the defensive line performs differently with Todd Grantham effectively out of that responsibility and Brian Young now into that responsibility. How do the Saints do in including Michael Hodges more in game planning against the run game, including Marcus Robertson more in game planning against the passing game? What do those things look like? That's going to be part of this new look. You're also going to see, with no Marshon Lattimore in the building, Alante Taylor gets his opportunity to prove that he can be the CB1 for this New Orleans Saints team for years to come. Years ago, the Saints traded away Bradley Roby so that Alante Taylor could play in the slot or went to Alante Taylor in the slot. Now they've traded away Marshon Lattimore. Alante Taylor gets his opportunity to prove that he should be the top cornerback in that cornerback room. I think he'll make good on that opportunity. It might not be immediately, but he will make good on that opportunity. We did for the insiders, our Locked On Saints insiders, a film study on the difference between Alante Taylor playing in the slot, understanding space, all these other things, and playing on the outside where he has the boundary, and how much of a difference it makes in terms of his ability to be able to match up and play to his best ability. That's where he should have been all along. And it was very close to turning into another Zach Bond situation. The thing that the guy did that got them drafted, the Saints weren't asking them to do. And then all of a sudden they depart. Think about Caden Ellis, think about Zach Bond. They get put in positions to do the things that they actually do well. And then boom, they're successful. Now, thankfully, Alante Taylor gets to go to the place where he has been successful and continue to play that. Even though I will give him a ton of credit for taking his step up in the slot game, especially in man coverage. There's a lot of those numbers. We broke this down in the film study for Locked On Saints Insiders as well. If you want to join the Insiders program, there's a link in the description, or you can text HOODAT to 504-285-7473, get film studies, all that kind of stuff. But with that film study, we also explain why, a lot of times he's got this many targets, this many catches, this many receptions doesn't really work. And it's kind of misleading. So, breaking all that kind of stuff down. But he has been outstanding in those situations. Now you put him on the outside, allow him to play a little bit more of that man coverage. I wonder if we'll see more zone coverage as the Saints kind of third down defense has gotten figured out over the course of the past few weeks, and see if, the Saints end up kind of mixing in some new things. But now that's another place where you could see new looks. You think about some other changes as well. Look, Will Harris Jr. is coming off of injured reserve. He was back to full participation on Thursday. I assume he'll be back to full participation today on Friday. Could he potentially get out on the field? But even if he does, I still expect to see second-year safety Jordan Howden get a lot of snaps. He's looked very good so far. He hasn't been targeted much. He hasn't been tested much. And even when he has, he's performed well in those situations. He's played down in the box, taking on blocks and doing all the things that we mentioned that he would need to develop. He's doing all those things now. So I don't know, do you disrupt Jordan Howden's development and then put Will Harris back in there? I think you got to get Will Harris out on the field. He helps you, don't get me wrong. But I'm just curious to see, with Alante Taylor playing on the outside, does Tyrann Mathieu, Will Harris, or Jordan Howden start getting some run in the slot along with Ugo Amadi in those situations? So we'll see how they like to get all those guys out on the field together. I'll mention real quick, too, Eric McCoy was back at practice, but I wouldn't expect to see him until after the bye week, although I am told he's trying to beat that timeline. I wouldn't expect to see him this weekend, though, for sure. Darren Rizzi made more changes, changed the way the orientation of the locker room. Everybody was kind of spread out. This was a COVID thing that they did, so that if it used to be that all the position groups are kind of together, so one bank or a couple banks of lockers would be the defensive backs, another bank would be the linebackers, 3 in a row would be the quarterbacks, so on and so forth. But they ended up switching that up during COVID, because if one of them got sick and then they were at the locker around the rest of their position group, you could knock out the entire position group, right? So they kind of interspersed and shuffled it all around. Darren Rizzi brought it back. So now as players, you go on the practice field together, you practice together, you walk off the practice field together, you go to the locker room together, you go to the film room together. You're always with your group, which I think is really great. And I'll tell you, being in the locker room this week so far is the best I've felt that locker room since before the week 3 game, right? Like that week leading up to the game against Philadelphia. They've changed the way that they practice. They've changed the rhythm. They've added the activation period to try to bring down some of those in-practice injuries. Players like Isaiah Stallbird are moving from linebacker to safety. Taysom Hill is kind of working in different areas and stuff like that. Like, there's just a lot different. And so this new look New Orleans Saints might not win the game this weekend, but will certainly be fun to watch, and will certainly be bringing a different product to the field under Darren Rizzi's watch. Coming up next, I want to dive into the players that will be the key building blocks for this team that will be on full display this weekend that you'll definitely want to keep an eye out on. Led off, of course, with that secondary. We got that coming up for you next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by our friends over at Arena Club. For most of us that are either getting into collecting cards or have already been collecting cards for a while, the idea of spending $2,000 or more on some Patrick Mahomes rookie card just simply isn't, well, in the cards. I mean, that's serious money to drop. But thanks to slab packs over at arenaclub.com, now it's possible to score gym cards just like those in a fraction of their retail price. Every card that you can find out there that might be listed in terms of high prices and all those other things has a hit from the last few weeks over at Arena Club Slab Packs drops. So go and check them out. Arena Club is the only repack that provides real value, complete with all possible cards and clear hit rates for each one. I'm kind of new to card collecting, so the transparency of this has been awesome to me. Makes it feel a little bit safer, you know what I mean, in terms of the investment. So right now, you can go over and get 10% off of your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com, just locked on NFL, and use that code locked on NFL. That's arenaclub.com/locked on NFL, code locked on NFL for 10% off your first purchase. Today's episode also brought to you by Hims. Look, man, it's important, right? You need a little boost in the bedroom. Sometimes you want to make sure you got what you need because you want to stop worrying about your performance so you can go ahead and grab Hims. So you can feel a little bit more confident in your situation whenever the mood strikes. Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. The process is 100% online, so there's no need for those uncomfortable doctor's visits or anything like that. No insurance is needed. All one low price that will cover everything for treatments to ongoing care. With hundreds of thousands of trusted subscribers, Hims will help you find what you're looking for and what works for you. So start your free trial today at hims.com/locked on. That's HIMS.com/locked on to get your personalized ED treatment options. That's hims.com/locked on. Products mentioned are chewable compounded products, which are not approved by or verified for safety and effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider and will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription is required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. All right, family, those new look New Orleans Saints are also going to be taking a look at some of the potential foundational building blocks of their future. If you caught us earlier this week, we broke down some of the players that we think we should be keeping an eye on, including cornerback Alante Taylor. We looked at running back Jordan Mims, Dallin Holker. I'm going to revisit some of those names, but also dive into some players that also might have a little bit of an opportunity here to do something slightly different. So I want to start off with the secondary here. And in the secondary, we're talking about a group of players. Obviously, Alante Taylor is part of the conversation. Quarterback Shamar Jean-Charles, who had one of the best interceptions I've seen in a long time. I'm going to tell you about that interception and what Shamar had to say about it here in just a sec. And I also want to take a look at Jordan Howden and Ugo Amadi. So these are the four guys we're going to be watching. Tyrann Mathieu, you already know who he is, what he does. He's the leader, all those other things, but he's not going to be a future building block for you throughout this rebuild. You're talking about Tyrann Mathieu probably being around for another season after this, and that's probably about it. We'll see, but that would be my estimation, right? So you're looking at the guys that are going to be a big part of this team's future moving forward. So Alante Taylor gets the opportunity now to move from the slot to the outside, play at his natural position, all those other things. One of the things that I really respect about Alante Taylor is that he went through the struggles and the building of trying to get things right in the slot, got there, right? Was much improved in the slot this year, but I think it's going to make him a better corner on the outside. Everybody's talking about how great their practices were this week and stuff like that. Alante was amongst that number. So I'm really excited to see what it looks like for Alante Taylor to go into a second week of actually working at the outside corner position and playing that position. He was a stud there during his rookie season. He got benched last year during the season while he was playing in the slot, had to come back and play on the outside and then immediately perform better. I mean, just outstanding stuff. And then now you got the opportunity to see him last week. And again, there were a couple of receptions that were credited to him, but where he was simply the closest person in coverage or it was zone coverage. When he's in man coverage and he's on that cornerback spot, he's typically not giving up anything. So he's got some stuff that he'll continue to clean up, but I'm really excited to see him. And it gives him an opportunity to prove what he wants to prove, which is that he wants to be a CB1 in the NFL. He would love nothing more than to do it with the team that drafted him. Shamar Jean-Charles is another one that gets another big opportunity here. Shamar's bounced around the NFL a little bit. Spent some time with the Packers and stuff like that. Was with New Orleans and then wasn't, and then was again, and then wasn't again, and then was again. And it's kind of bounced on and off the roster. And then you saw the way that he performed last week. He performed really well. He had the interception just a couple plays before that. He had surrendered a touchdown, but then got an opportunity, because in the NFL, there's always another snap to play. Got an opportunity and went out there and literally took the ball from Xavier Legette, who in the post-game presser, when they spoke to Xavier Legette, the rookie wide receiver for the Carolina Panthers, he was still trying to figure out how John Charles got it. So I asked Shamar in the locker room a little bit about, that interception. And he said that the position that he was in, he didn't feel like he could successfully turn around and make a play on the ball. So his only option was to make a play on the receiver's hands. So once he saw Legette's hands come up, he did the typical good, well-trained DB thing and put his hands into the space between Xavier Legette's hands. In doing that, the ball showed up. And then when he said to me, when he saw the ball, and I'm not going to repeat it exactly, but he took that bleep away. He took it, right? And so he just saw the opportunity. Oh, sorry. No, it wasn't I took that bleep away. It was I took that bleep. That's what it was. And he just kind of ripped it right out of his hands and everything like that. He said that his mentality over and over again is always get the ball back to the offense. He thinks about the ball every play, which is a really good mentality to have because it helps you kind of assist in that short-term memory you have to have as a corner, because you're not thinking about the results of the play. You're thinking about the ball, right? I know that sounds like it's not really a thing, but like mentally in the game, it is definitely a thing. And so it was a great play by him, and it was cool to kind of hear him break all that down and kind of share his mentality around that. Safeties Jordan Howden and Ugo Amadi, they get opportunities now to kind of figure out sort of where they're going to be most effective and everything. I think Jordan Howden is one of the safeties of the future for the New Orleans Saints, so I'm very excited to see him continue to settle in his role. At the beginning of the year, he was kind of playing a lot more away from the line of scrimmage. Here, as of late, he still plays a lot away from the line of scrimmage, but ends up also coming down, playing off blocks and things like that. He's been very successful there, been a secure tackler, all those things. So I'm really really excited rather about seeing what else you're able to get out of Jordan Howden. And then Ugo Amadi is going to move into the slot. Performed pretty well there last week. Loves playing in that area. Loves the space that he has to work with, understands because he plays so much and just played so many different positions and in so many different schemes against so many schemes. He kind of understands a little bit more. Where's the help? Where's the space? Where's the leverage? All those other things. So excited to see him there as well. So I think this secondary is going to be a lot of fun to watch, and they're going to be tested, right? You got a veteran quarterback in Kirk Cousins. You've got good receivers over in Atlanta. You're getting good pass catchers as a whole over in Atlanta. And then those guys are going to have to come down, especially Ugo Amadi in the slot and help in run support. Jordan Howden's going to have to help in run support, all those other things up against Bijan and Tyler Algier, who just seems to eat this team alive every time that he plays them. They're going to have to play a big role in that, so they get an opportunity to step up there. Another guy that I'm really interested in seeing is Willie Gay Jr. A, does he see more snaps? B, does he see snaps at different spots? I mean, we saw him playing punt gunner last week, right? And that wasn't out of the ordinary. I asked Phil Galliano about it, who is kind of stepping into a little bit more of Darren Rizzi's special teams role, while Darren Rizzi's attention now he's having to look two different ways and all these other things. So Galliano stepping up in there. The team added Marwan Malouf to come in to kind of help. They call him Moof, come in to help as well from a quality control standpoint. And so I asked Galliano about, Willie Gay at gunner, and he actually said that this wasn't the first time. Earlier this season was the same thing, but the hand injury kind of sidelined that a little bit. And so he was finally able to get back in there, loves the role, all that. But I'm curious to see if maybe with Dennis Allen out, Joe Woods leading the way in terms of defensive play calling and stuff like that. Michael Hodges now a bigger voice in the run game, game plan, and all these other things. If Willie Gay Jr. maybe gets an opportunity to be a little bit more involved, because I think the Saints have either misused him or underutilized him, depending upon what situation we're discussing. Oh my goodness. And so I'm excited to see if maybe he gets more opportunities and stuff like that. Over on the offensive side, Dallin Holker, the young tight end, does he get more involved? He certainly did last week because he had to start lining up on the outside. As the Saints for a little while were down to just 3 active possible wide receivers until Cedric Wilson came back. But of course, Cedric Wilson's been out of practice all week this week. So no Cedric Wilson, no Chris Olave expected in this game, as he's seeing a specialist about his concussion and all those other things. So he's kind of out indefinitely at the moment. We don't know when he'll be back. If he'll be back this season, we'll figure out. What we were told is all options are on the table. So we'll see what happens with Chris Olave there. But he is doing well personally as a human being, which is the really most important part here. And I love the way that Darren Rizzi said it. They're more worried about Chris Olave, the person, than they are concerned about Chris Olave, the player, right now, which is exactly the way that this franchise, this team, this organization, and the NFL should be pursuing and taking a look at this situation. So a guy like Dallin Holker might get more pass catching opportunities because the Saints just simply need more bodies at wide receiver. We'll see if Jermaine Jackson gets more involved in the offense. Mason Tipton more involved in the offense. Some of those younger guys. So you see more players come off the practice squad. Equanimous St. Brown and Kevin Austin Jr. Like, do these guys come out and have a little bit more impact and opportunity over on the offensive side? Dante Pettis, like, you're going to get a look at a lot of different potential pass catchers for this New Orleans Saints team over the remainder of the year. And then finally at running back, Jordan Mims, and then eventually Kendre Miller. I'm going to table the Kendre Miller thing. I'm going to come back to it here in just a second. Jordan Mims, though, another guy that we'll get an opportunity to see immediately this week. But I do want to tell you more about the Kendre Miller situation that I reported on over at LouisianaSports.net. If you missed the article, I want to tell you a little bit about it here. So let's get to that, as well as the expectations for what should happen this weekend against the Atlanta Falcons next. We got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by friends over at LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring, especially for a small business, you want to make sure you're finding qualified candidates that suit your needs, that fit your culture, that help you make your organization, your job, your business the best that it can be. Because as you know, your business is only as good as the people who help to run it and the people that are a part of it. So LinkedIn Jobs gives you all the tools to hire the right professionals for your team fast and for free. They also give you some really cool stuff. Look, they give you access to this incredible network of professionals that are sometimes looking for work, or sometimes they might not be, but you can provide them their dream job. 70% of LinkedIn users don't even visit other leading job sites, and 86% of small businesses get a qualified hire when they post their job over at LinkedIn within 24 hours. So hire professionals like a professional over at LinkedIn. Post your job for free today at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, where you can go and get ready to tackle all the NFL action from what should be an exciting weekend. Maybe you got in on that incredible Thursday night football game. Incredible and incredulous when it comes to the officiating. Yet again, we'll see where things go. But you know what? Kind of happy that the Baltimore Ravens won, because that's where my money was. So you can go and get in on your action as well this weekend over at FanDuel, because right now new customers can put down $5 and get $150 back in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. The FanDuel Sportsbook app also has everything you need to be able to place live bets, check live play-by-play, the latest stats, all in the same place where you place your bets. The Saints 3.5-point underdogs. Think they pull off the upset. Think the Falcons cover. Think the Saints lose, but by less than 3.5. You can get into all of that over at FanDuel.com. That's where you want to head to join today, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's FanDuel.com, where you can never waste a hunch and make every moment more with an official sports book partner of the NFL. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. If you're hoping to see Kendre Miller soon, it sounds like he could be back out on the field ASAP, as soon as he is eligible, coming off of injured reserve. I spoke to a lot of sources around this story that are reported on over at LouisianaSports.net if you want to read the full story around it. But basically, the idea here is that Kendre Miller's latest injury, the hamstring injury, which was the opposite leg from the one that sidelined him all through training camp and all through the beginning of the season, is a pretty minor situation that one source told me that he could have gone back in up against the Los Angeles Chargers. Another tells me that he's 100% now, and that it wasn't a move that is that made that they felt like injured reserve was necessary and stuff like that. Now, let me be very clear. The Saints didn't do anything like against the rules in this situation. The only qualification you have to be put on injured reserve is to be injured. Doesn't mean that you have to be injured to a certain severity or a certain degree. All you have to do is be injured. Ow, my pinky hurts. I'm going to injured reserve. Like, that's fine. That's okay. You can do that. So I want to be very clear that the New Orleans Saints broke no rules in this situation. However, it created a lot of confusion and a lot of frustration, all kind of directed, at least in the general direction, of former head coach Dennis Allen when he was placed on injured reserve. Because the original plan, as far as I'm told, is that they would play it cautious, keep him out against the Carolina Panthers as to not worsen things, similar to what you saw with Marshon Lattimore early in the season, right? Hamstring injury, week 2, they sat him. Hey, we don't want this to turn into a multi-week thing, so on and so forth. It ended up being a wise decision at the time. Probably was a wise decision for Kendre Miller as well. But the intent was to have him back for this game up against the Atlanta Falcons, an opportunity to see a player that desperately needs to prove that he can be a part of the future of this team and a valuable part of the future of this team. But instead, he was placed on injured reserve. And one of the sources that I spoke to told me, quote, Dennis Allen had, or let me say it this way. One of the sources that I spoke to told me that Dennis Allen, quote, had a lot to do with it, end quote. So that's the situation there. And it caused a lot of confusion, frustration, apparently amongst the coaching staff and all these other things. So just something to keep an eye out on. It's over. It's done. Dennis Allen's gone. It doesn't matter anymore. But it's an interesting story. And it just kind of gives you a little bit of a peek behind the veil of some of the things that were kind of going on, or at least what we're being told was going on behind closed doors. The big thing here, though, with Kendre is that he gets an opportunity to come back. It won't be until the Giants game. So 2 weeks after the bye week, he's got to miss the Carolina Panthers game. He's got to miss this game against the Atlanta Falcons. He's got to miss the Cleveland Browns game. Then they have a bye week, but the bye week doesn't count in terms of the return timeline. It's not a 4-week absence. It's a 4-game absence that's required on injured reserve. So then he also won't be available against the Los Angeles Rams. So it's in New York, or excuse me, in New Jersey, going up against the New York Giants. As a former New Yorker for a little while myself, working in New York, I'm very defensive about where the Jets and Giants play. All right. But that's when he'll be able to make his return, is in the great state of New Jersey, not New York. So that's what we're going to see there. So that will be the opportunity for you to be able to kind of see a little bit more of, hey, what does Kendre Miller have to offer? So that's where that's going, because there's a chance here that that's the complement to Alvin Kamara until Alvin Kamara is finished here in New Orleans. Then all of a sudden, what do you add to Kendre Miller after that? So that's what you're going to be looking for. Okay, so what are the reasonable expectations for the New Orleans Saints going up against the Atlanta Falcons? I've got 3 things that I think are really what we're looking for, and none of them are the final score, right? This is where it is finally appropriate to say that you're looking beyond the results, right? You're looking at things beyond the results in this game. I do think that that is true here moving forward to the rest of the season. I don't think that that should have been the case when it came to Dennis Allen. And clearly Saints owner Gail Benson agrees with that. And then but for me, it's moving ahead. Like, absolutely. Like, you're not judging stuff based on just the final score for the rest of these weeks. You're really looking at, like, what is this team? So here are 3 things I'm looking for. I want to see this team. Let me not say it that way. I shouldn't say I want to. It's not really about me. But I think that this team wants to prove that it can play with a real chip on its shoulder, wants to show you that it can get out of its own way and play with some discipline, right? That's another big one. I had an insider and I were talking earlier this morning around, like, what really was the issue with the New Orleans Saints offense going up against the Carolina Panthers. They piled on a bunch of yards. They were successful in the run game, all this other stuff. They just couldn't score. And it's like, well, yeah. And we both acknowledged, of course, the scoring was a big lack. But it was the penalties too, right? Over 100 penalty yards again for this New Orleans Saints team, and penalties at just the worst decisions, 2 straight, are not decisions. Worst times, 2 straight holding penalties, putting them in bad positions, and all these other things. Those types of things. Got to show that you can get out of your own way. Stop shooting yourself in the foot. And of course, the last time that these 2 teams played in Atlanta, that game was decided because of how much the Saints shot themselves in the foot. A mishandled snap, mishandled punt that led to a touchdown, a fluky interception, pick 6 for Troy Anderson. That's 14 points that the Saints were spotting to Atlanta right away. And so you're not going to be able to do that in this game. You got to show you can get out of your own way. And then finally, compete and repeat. And when I say compete and repeat, I mean compete in this game, compete in the next game, compete in the next game, compete in the next game. Just keep competing. That's got to be the biggest thing that you're looking for from this team. Darren Rizzi is gonna play with, or is going to coach rather, with a lot of attitude in these upcoming games. One of the things that he told us was that the New Orleans Saints won't be a boring team to watch. That he promised. And he promised that to the fans as well. I believe him. I think that that's true. I mean, just look at the personality of Darren Rizzi. There's not a single thing boring about the guy, right? Grew up a fighter, as he said, in New Jersey, was a walk-on at college, was in the NFL as a free agent, started coaching in Division II, worked his way up to the NFL, grinded and grinded and grinded, special teams, all this, that, and the other. And then eventually, coached at Maine. And then, boom, here he is, interim head coach for the New Orleans Saints and auditioning for the full-time role. Don't forget that. So it's not that he doesn't have anything to lose. He has an opportunity to lose, but he's got a lot to gain. And so do the rest of these New Orleans Saints. And so I think that that's what you're looking for. Can they play inspired football for what will feel like the first time in a long time? You can say that week 1 and week 2 were inspired football games. You absolutely can say that. I would dig back even further than that because I think there's a difference between playing inspired and playing with no one competing with you, right? Playing against bad teams. This is a good team. And what the New Orleans Saints have not been able to do once under Dennis Allen is beat a team that's better than them. Now, asterisk, right? They beat the 13-3 Philadelphia Eagles years ago with Gardner Minshew at quarterback, not Jalen Hurts. So not the same thing, right? So this would be Darren Rizzi's first head coaching opportunity with this New Orleans Saints team. It's going up against the the Atlanta Falcons. Coming to New Orleans, bitter rivals, all those things. He has an opportunity to revive this rivalry with pettiness, with attitude, with fight, with grit, with grind. And he's got a chance here to do something that Dennis Allen could not do his entire tenure as the New Orleans Saints head coach for 2.5 years. And it's beat a team that's better than him. Beat a team that's better than this team, better record-wise. Can Darren Rizzi do it? If he doesn't, it's not a failure. It's not a failure at all. You're looking at, did this team compete? Can this team fail? Absolutely. They go out there, they don't compete, they look flat, all the other things that we've seen throughout some of the season. It's as close to failure as you're going to get. I don't think there's any such thing as failure in sports. Go and listen to Giannis Antetokounmpo talk about that a couple of years ago. I agree with him. I don't think there's any such thing as failure in sports. But you can get close. And you don't want to get close up in this game. You want to go out there and show that you can compete. I think the Saints now have the right leadership at the helm at head coach to do that. That's going to come with energy. That's going to be there and push and drive and get these guys' faces and demand the best out of them while also putting them in the best situations to succeed. That's all that I want to see. Are you doing that? And then if you win, fantastic. Fantastic. We're not going to buy into all the hype here. But if they win, fantastic nonetheless. So that's what I'm expecting when it comes to this New Orleans Saints team. Compete and repeat, play with the shoulder, play with a chip on your shoulder, and get out your own way. That's all I want to see from this New Orleans Saints team this weekend. We appreciate you very much, as always, for being here with us and making us your first listen of the day every day. Make sure you go and check out Locked On NFL for the rest of what's going on around the league as well. We'll see you at the latest on Sunday, but I got something cooking. I might have something for you before then, taking a look ahead. But Sunday at the very latest, taking a look at this New Orleans Saints team after the game. We'll be live from the floor of the Superdome, and then you can catch me on Channel 4 and all the other stuff after that. And we'll be right back here with you Monday through Friday for next week as the Saints get ready to host Jameis and the Cleveland Browns. We appreciate you very much for making us a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. If you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing them, how you living. Let me know how you're momming them. Trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.